The jury is still out on whether the Constitutional Court will allow the postponement of the October local government elections to early next year. Processes to South Africa's upcoming local government elections seem to be dogged by problems. Now, despite the anticipated court decision to decide whether the elections should be postponed due to the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, the ANC is applying to the Electoral Court for the reopening of the process for political parties to resubmit their candidate lists. And the majority party also says that it experienced numerous technical problems with the Independent Electoral Commission's registration system, which prevented it from registering some of their candidates in 30 municipalities. The United Democratic Movement says it will join the ANC as friends of the court, as the party believes that the IEC timetable was unrealistic from the beginning. But parties such as the DA and COPE reject the proposal to reopen submission dates. Policy analyst and chairperson of the Electoral Monitoring Network, Nkosikulule Nyembezi, joins us now to talk about some of these developments. Mr. Nyembezi, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So this is not the first time that the IEC would have been faced with some request or, someone trying to prevail upon the Electoral Commission to actually allow them some sort of leeway either for submission or payment allowances. So talk to us about what is happening at the moment regarding the ANC and what they are saying and how this is likely to impact on the credibility of the poll.
Yes, they say nothing happens that has never happened before. So we see that the ANC is now in a corner for failure to meet the election timetable deadlines. But this is not new because back in 2011, the IFP was in a similar position and it applied to the court to say we could not submit our documents on time, our candidate list on time, and we risk being excluded from the process. But again, in looking in the matter, the court emphasized that there needs to be integrity in the electoral process in order for them to be accepted and seen as being free and fair. And I think that would be the approach now on the side of the IEC and on the side of the court if the ANC decides to go to the court, because what is under challenge would be the integrity of the electoral process.
So looking at those previous cases, as you indicated, the IFP, and there was something that they dealt with in 2011 and in 2016. You had the ACDP also going through something similar. And given that the Electoral Court actually upheld the deadlines of the IEC, what are the chances of them agreeing with the ANC's request at this stage?
The chances are very minimal. It was actually the Constitutional Court that heard the matter. And it was held that elections must not only be free and fair, but they must be perceived as being free and fair. So the IEC has to be even-handed in dealing with all political parties and candidates. That is crucial to that integrity, because the perception of voters must be that the IEC is dealing with parties even-handedly. And the IEC must not be placed under undue burden to administer the elections, because if all parties were to come with all sorts of excuses, that would be an administrative burden for the IEC to be able to receive those candidate lists. We know that at the beginning of the year, President Ramaphosa consulted all political parties to say that there will be elections in 2021. And he announced the date of the elections. But even before that, we all knew as South Africans that in August 2021, the term of the current municipal councillors is coming to an end. So the preparations were supposed to start way back. And also the election timetable is prescribed by law as to what starts, what follows in a cascading manner. So nobody can claim to have been ambushed and not knowing what the sequence of the deadlines was going to look like. So they will have an appeal in convincing the IEC or even the court that there needs to be some leeway made for them.
Last week, we saw on some of the social media platforms some videos doing the round, one particularly of ANC members or alleged ANC members, because this is how they identify themselves on this video, going to the IEC offices and saying that the IEC should not accept any nominations or names, rather, for the city of Tshwane from the ANC because they were unhappy with that process. Now, that issue, considering that they have taken these alleged members of the ANC, that matter, straight to the IEC's doorstep instead of to Luthuli House, what should we read into that, and what are the dangers of those sort of actions?
Those actions are dangerous and unacceptable. They demonstrate how political parties have deteriorated into a liability in our democracy. Because whereas in the past the litigation and the conflict context was between political parties and or individuals, in the last 6 years, we have seen a challenge directly to the IEC, or IEC being drawn into a political thicket of the conflict and factions within political parties. It is something that needs to be discouraged. Of course, in the past 4 years, we have seen progress in the legislation that regulates how the IEC can deal with these matters so as to insulate it. Because the political parties such as the PAC had similar problems where different factions submitted different lists, and the IEC in the past was unable to deal effectively with that. But now the law is firm in terms of who is allowed to submit the list and how the IEC is going to deal with that. And so we can say it is not so much of a threat, except exposing political parties as being a liability to our democracy.
Mr. Nyembezi, we also have the IEC application currently before the Constitutional Court. This, of course, in an attempt to have the elections postponed. Now, legal analysts have been saying that the court outcome might not necessarily favor a postponement of the election date from a legal point of view. But there are others, of course, who hold a different point of view. But what happens in the case that the IEC don't have a legal avenue to further appeal the Constitutional Court's decision and the election date is upheld? Given everything that we are seeing, given the fact that it seems that some political parties are wholly inadequately prepared to proceed at this stage, what should we be reading into that particular outcome that we are awaiting from the Constitutional Court?
Well, the IEC will then have to work hard to absolve itself, because in the image of South Africans, the IEC is bending on the pressure of political parties who have not gotten their house into order by submitting this application. The IEC was supposed to follow the election timetable rigorously. What the IEC will be blamed for is a lack of aggressive voter registration process, as we have seen that there is a huge number of people still unregistered. Some of them, because of the coronavirus, have moved from where they were used to live and they cannot vote there. As we know that in these elections, because they are local government elections, you must vote in the area where you live. Some people have moved and they have not been afforded an opportunity to register. That will fall squarely on the shoulders of the IEC. But again, the court is unlikely to grant this application because a lot of things do not depend they are not on the hands of the IEC or any of the parties that are listed there. If the political parties now are bankrupt financially and therefore they cannot hold list conferences, and if there are internal factions, there is no guarantee that if we postpone elections to February, we will be in a better position. But also, even if we are to look at it from a health point of view, to say there is coronavirus pandemic, President Ramaphosa is unlikely to call for a lockdown on election campaigns at a time when the vaccination numbers are going up and everybody is being encouraged to vaccinate. And we know that the health professionals are telling that in summer, during the festive season, there will be another lockdown because of a likely wave of a summer peak in this, and it's going to affect the vaccinated and unvaccinated. So in short, political parties must accept that our elections will be a new normal where we do not have political gatherings, the rallies, where we have the social distance just because the coronavirus dictates that, and it's going to be a new normal.
So let's just hypothetically assume that the Constitutional Court says yes to the IEC. What sort of impact would that have on the process in the preparations for the poll and also the ANC's request? Would that put the IEC under some pressure? Would they then, as the Electoral Commission, be able to say no to the reopening of the submissions in that instance?
Well, on two things. I think the court itself cannot postpone the elections. It can come with a judgment that instructs Parliament and other actors to then amend the legislation so that we get a postponement. Because of the factions in the ANC and other parties, it is likely that that process can be frustrated even in Parliament to say, here is a court judgment that says, let us amend the Electoral Act or whatever piece of legislation. But to convene Parliament and to get the necessary votes to do that is something that is not guaranteed. And secondly, I think in overall, all South Africans want these elections to be successful. So if the court grants the postponement, nobody will be violently objecting to that. But the trick is that those requirements and the ingredients that must be put in place in order for us to be ready for whatever date are not guaranteed. As we say, political parties are bankrupt. That is why they are not holding meetings. Political parties are fighting internally. That is why we are not having the process ready. And now the biggest threat is the violence. As we see that these prospective candidates are being killed, the number of candidates that are dying in the last 4 months is increasing in many provinces. And the longer we delay the process, the more we are likely to see all of that happening. So it's a dicey situation, but we hope that our democracy, because it is resilient, we will go through it.
And just finally, Mr. Nyembezi, the UDM, for example, has pointed out they believe the IEC's timetable was unrealistic from the beginning. What's your take on that?
They have to explain what they mean, because the timetable is prescribed by law. From day one, we knew that the term of office of the current councillors ends on the 3rd of August, 2021. And once that date kicks in, we need to have elections within 90 days. And what needs to happen in those 90 days is what we've been going through. It's prescribed by law. So the IEC has not introduced anything new. When President Ramaphosa announced the date of elections, he was announcing to people who already knew that this year we have the elections, and they agreed with that. And that was early in the year. The proclamation by Minister Nkosazana Zuma on the 3rd of August to say, indeed, October 27 is the date for the elections as prescribed by law, it did not ambush anybody. So the UDM will have to explain what they mean in terms of this unreasonableness, because it is a prescribed process that also gives assurance to our democracy that elections will be held regularly as required by the Constitution, and they will not be subjected to the mood of politicians and the incumbents in office.
So is it possible to have free and fair elections, whether they happen in October or in February? Would it be possible to have an election that is free and fair?
It should be possible, particularly because the local government elections allow for independent candidates to contest. And so if political parties haven't gotten their house in order, we will have sufficient number of independent candidates to fill that ballot paper and to constitute the municipalities. We could now be seeing a shift, especially because of the high unemployment rate, where we see that the masses are rejecting the political parties because it is the same political parties who must campaign, go back to explain why they didn't fulfill the promises that got them into office last time. So the point is, yes, we will have free and fair elections if the IEC sticks to the law, and also because we will not be in short of candidates, particularly, for example, in this case of the ANC having failed to submit the list. It doesn't mean that in those municipalities we'll be short of candidates. There are independent candidates as well.
Well, thanks so much. Policy analyst and chairperson of the Election Monitoring Network, Nkosikhulule Nyembezi, talking to us about his perspective on whether it would be feasible for the IEC to reopen political party candidate lists for the October local government elections as proposed by the ANC, and of course a few other issues around the upcoming local government election poll as well.